Welcome everybody as we revive in person. Yes, DJ, do a little dance, would you?
Everything is juggled. And I think everything
revive in person brown bags. And what we're doing, this is a Seth suggestion, is we're streaming them, but not zooming. So you can't, if you're watching out there in the big bad world, you can watch and you can save up your questions for later. But in order to ask your questions now, you have to be here. So you guys get to do that. So Seth Kinzie is first a friend, personal friend, but also a friend to the Josephy Center, where he has done all kinds of, he fixes all of our little technical glitches and has worked a lot on the digitization of the library, which you people, if anybody's really interested, it's getting to be very cool. You'll be able to click on something in the library and say, what do you know about Nez Perce fisheries? And you'll be able to go and find that out. Seth's helping us rig that all up. And see, the other thing, I get up here first to just BS for 5 minutes while people slowly filter in. The other thing that is important about Seth and his appearance here is that he is an International Peace Fellow with Rotary International. Rotary has long had an international fellowship program. Those of you who are old enough to remember Bill Moyers was a Rotary Fellow, okay, and studied abroad on a Rotary Fellowship. The only Rotary Fellowship we've had here prior to Seth was Aaron. Help me, Ralph. Aaron Himes, who spent a year in Singapore and learned Chinese, among other things, was there, and got a master's degree in international relations, and now is involved in Florida with international relations somewhere in South America. So Rotary has gradually shifted its focus over the last few years, not just to internationalism, but to the idea of international peace. And in doing so, it has formed relationships with several universities around the world who dedicate some of their work to peace studies, to conflict resolution. And Seth will tell you more about his particular program, but if you know other people out there who are really involved in or really interested in international programs, and especially programs that address conflict resolutions, get in touch with us, okay? I guess that's it. I think we're good now, Seth.
Great.
So please welcome. I got to tell you one more thing about Seth. You know, this guy's from an amazing family. I met his uncle before I knew him. I had his uncle at Fish Trap 20 years ago when we did a program. I forget what the title was, but his uncle is a psychiatrist at Oregon Health Sciences, and he treats torture victims from around the world. And he came here with an escapee from, see, it was good. I kept talking. He came here with one of his clients who was working with him then, who was a Laotian who had been in a death camp for 5 years. And anyway, I've never met anybody who has dedicated a life to such hard work as his uncle, David. So, he comes with good credits. Thanks.
And he's a great piano player.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Good to be back. Good to see everybody here again. I've been traveling off and on since September, and I still have 1 to 1 million trips left, depending on how the rest of the project goes. So it's great to see some hometown faces and tell you what I've been up to over the last year. So I was awarded a Rotary Peace Fellowship. These are the 6 programs around the world where you can study peace and conflict at an institutional level with Rotary and a university, trying to have one or two on each continent to study peace and conflict from a local perspective. So we've got England, we've got Australia, we've got Japan, we've got Sweden, we've got Duke, we've got Thailand there in the left side, and then in the top left we've got Uganda. They just opened a new center in Uganda for me to, they did it for me. I was the first cohort to apply to this program. It's either there or Bangkok, and for the specific thing I wanted to study. And I'd been to Bangkok. Thailand's an amazing place, but Bangkok is very, it's kind of the Vegas of Asia in a lot of ways. I got swindled 3 times in one day. They both are very naive, so anyway. I didn't want to go back there, and I'd been doing some work in Nigeria with my mother, speaking of family, who is a conflict transformation professor and minister of the Church of the Brethren, working with Nigerian clergy on conflict transformation. So I was working with her, really just taking her class to learn about these studies in Nigeria. And so it kind of gave me an into sort of African perspective of peacemaking. And 10 years before, I worked for an interfaith group called Monks Without Borders that was trying to build the world's first museum of world religions. I guess I need to use this more often. So, that's back good. So that took me to work with some people in Cameroon. They're working on translating a peace course into French. So from that, I applied to this program, and I think I just wrote a great essay. I got in. There were 3 Americans and 15 people, I think, from Africa, and a couple others from Europe that wrote this program. So you study peace and conflict at the university for a couple of months, and then you have 10 months to work on a peace project that has to be based in the African continent. So I'm working on an African peacemaking database. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm very grateful for Rotary, for Judy Allen in particular, for telling me to apply to this program, because I thought there's no way I would get it, and she was like, oh, you're going to get it. And she was right. So thank you, Judy. And it's just really cool, you know, from all the stuff I've learned being here in Joseph since 2013, kind of bringing that rural living style out to another place, and then of course bringing that, I would say community style living that you learn out in Africa back here is really special too. And I'm really grateful for our awesome community that we have here, because I think it's kind of rare. So I went to the top left in October. I'm just going to show you a bunch of pictures. There's a lot sort of to say. I'm just going to show a bunch of pictures and show some of the monkeys that I met out there. And then if you have any questions about the program that I'm putting on and hopefully doing for the next 5 years too, I welcome your questions. So the basis of my research is on the Global Peace Index. The Global Peace Index is one of the best forms of research for identifying how peacefulness exists in the world. And it ranks every country's peacefulness. You can see the United States is 129. If you have a very small country or less than 1 million people in your country, you're not eligible for the index. So instead of 195 countries, they have 164. 129 out of 164, not very good. The US is really low on the index because we have a ton of weapons. We sell a ton of weapons. We have a lot of nuclear weapons in particular. We fight a lot of wars in other places. We drop a lot of bombs. And we have a really, really high prison population in terms of how many people we have in our country. So that's why we're really low on the Peace Index. Now, I think this is fascinating. I've been studying it for the last 10 years. The Institute for Economics and Peace puts this on. There's other really interesting indexes about peacefulness in the world. There's the Fragile States Index. There's the Human Development Index. There's sort of some gender indexes about women's rights, but they're really imperfect, I think. There's also the World Happiness Report, started by, what's the country next? Bhutan, which wanted to get rid of gross domestic product as a marker of how well-to-do countries are, and do happiness instead as a marker. And people in Bhutan at the start of this index happened to be very, very happy. So when they did this, it's just a questionnaire, anonymous. You just ask people about their happiness in their life. Bhutan's very high. South America, in terms of like vitality and passion for most happiness moments per day wins. I'm not quite sure how you measure it, but they did, and that's what they got. Unfortunately, Bhutan later on now is not very happy, so it's low on the index of creative.
They got television.
There you go. There you go. Thank you. So there's these interesting reports. Now, the things that I have issues with these is that one, all these places that study the world are created by people in Australia, Europe, or the United States. So there's no global index on happiness or peacefulness created by Latin countries, created by Asian countries, or created by African countries. So it's our perspective of what happiness and democracy is. And you can see how that can be an issue in places that has a different viewpoint of what the world should sort of focus on.
Seth, what's the number on the right?
The number on the right is the ranking. The lower you are, the more peaceful you are. Anyone want to guess the most peaceful country in the world? Pretty much consistently.
Canada.
Iceland.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say Iceland every time I present because I love that country, so thank you. There's 24 metrics, and they weight the metrics. Also, the other issue I have, in addition to making universal metrics for every place, there's no contextualization of it, is that the application of how we measure peace to the experience, fulfillment, and practice of peace is it doesn't fit. If you see that your country has a lot of weapons, or there's some gender issues in the workplace, and you want to I want more peace in my life, or I want more peace in my country, how do you apply those standards to your own personal life or your own personal community? I don't have an answer to that. On a national level, there's some things you can do to legislate those issues, and I think that's sort of what they're trying to get at with this report. But I saw that gap there, and some other people have recognized that gap too, of overemphasizing, because as a Western society, we love analytics, we love measurement, we love empiricism. We overemphasize that part of doing research in a different place, and we underemphasize the practice of what people do, which is a lot harder to research because that's an experience. It's not a fact. So from this, I had this idea of doing a peacemaking database where we go to different cultures, and we don't rank anything. We just ask them how peace has existed in your personal and your community, and what the actual daily practices are for bringing peace into your life. For the sake of people who want to bring peace in their life and don't feel peaceful, how they can learn from people who are inspiring peacemakers. And there's a lot of methods that we can use in different countries for mitigating conflict when we think that conflict is close to coming out in these places. It's called an early warning system. They use it all over Southern Europe and in Africa, particularly after seeing genocide come in. We think, we knew that was coming and we didn't do anything about it. So we need to have steps that go into place for mitigating the conflict when they arise. These steps would follow something that we would call negative peace. There's negative peace and there's positive peace. When we think about a peace agreement, we're really just talking about negative peace, where the war is over. Or if you're in a fight with your spouse and suddenly you solve the fight, there's probably no positive peace. You're not feeling a ton of harmony, but the negative piece of the argument or the violence that came from that conflict is over. So I'm hoping to find a place where we bring in positive peace elements, cultural rituals, and practices that can bring harmony and nourish harmony in a society, nourish relationships in a society, and nourish an individual sense of peace, in addition to just stopping the conflict, which is also very important. If you get to war, if you get to a conflict that has war, you're really far away from anything close to peace, because we know when war is over, there's long, long, long way to go till people are actually feeling happiness in their life. So that's kind of an overview of the type of work that I wanted to contribute with my project. Here I am in front of a big tree. I love jungles because they're just full of life, so getting to go to a jungle was really cool. So just thought I'd throw that one out there. These are my friends. We're in front of a mosque in Uganda, so we all got together and studied for 2 months in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda. Uganda is a bit of a fulcrum in which way it's going to go in African politics, because there's a fair amount of development, They have a fair amount of foreign aid and a lot of NGOs there doing really interesting work. Their culture is quite lively. It's fairly peaceful in the city. There's been continuous warfare in the north for probably 40 years. They also have Africa's longest serving president. It's been older than me, so take that for what you want there. So there's other issues there, wondering which way it's going to go. It's also one of the youngest countries in the world. If you're walking around there, you don't see people who are very old. And it's the same size as Oregon, but 10 times the population.
Wow.
So there's so many young people and there's not a lot of jobs, there's not a lot to do, hopelessness comes out. You can see that there. I did manage to teach piano lessons at the local piano center to a wonderful student named Jonathan, who was all about composition methods, which they don't really have a way of studying that there, so I had a great time with him on Wednesdays. I'd walk down to the piano center, we'd do our lessons, I'd get to play a little piano. They had 15 pianos in this one building. It's one of the only places I could find pianos in all of Africa. 15 pianos all there. I was pretty happy.
Did you try them all out?
No, just the good ones. Okay, here's the first monkey I saw. This is a white-nosed, red-tailed monkey. Truly, that's what it's called. And that was at the same jungle that I went to earlier on, too. So, that was fun. This is me in front of the singing sacred cow culture, where this guy sings to these cows. And it's an amazing song. So it was really rainy, and I was cold, but I got that photo.
What's the purpose of singing to them?
I think it's just part of their relationship with the animals, yeah, as they do herding. So he gave us a singing performance. I think this is actually in Rwanda. Just a little bit. Okay, so we're skipping ahead now to Ethiopia. This is my favorite monkey moment ever. This is the colobus monkey, and you just put nuts on your head, and they eat the nuts off your head. And these are some of my Ethiopian friends. So I went for a couple months, I studied, and then I had an idea of how I want to do this project of gathering peace practices. And it takes this form, where you have a bunch of people on the ground, you identify the types of people you want to talk to ask them about peace in their lives. Primarily youth, elders, chiefs, and women, with a little bit of an assist from artists, academics, and government officials. So that's the people on the ground we meet. I connected with the United Nations Interfaith Branch, which is called the United Religions Initiative. I met an amazing guy named Muse Hailu, who is the founder of Golden Rule Day and the interfaith ambassador for the African Union and the United Nations. And I've been working on meetings with him for probably 2 years. I finally got my meeting. I had been riding my bike all day. It was a 40-mile ride. I was not expecting it to be that long. And I was locked out of my hotel because everyone was at church. So I couldn't change. And I was just wearing a Seattle Seahawks football jersey and really dirty pants. So on my way up, I went to a clothing store and said, "Can I trade you this jersey? This is a $50 jersey for any dress shirt." And they were like, "Sure." So they gave me a shirt. I made it to my meeting. And I didn't have any money. They also wanted money. There was a miscommunication. By the time I left and I gave them the shirt, they're like, "Oh, no, we don't want the shirt. I just wanted the photo with the shirt. Come back next month with the money. You can pay me anytime." So I was like, okay, yeah. So I came back next month, gave them the money. The people at the place where I gave them the money were not the same people who asked for the money. So I just come in there with a big wad of cash. I'm like, "Thank you for that shirt." And they're like, "Yeah, right." You meet with these people. There's cooperation circles that the United Religions Initiative has founded in 128 countries. They're basically interfaith peace villages or peace communities. So I would go to these communities and lead workshops with them. And then the top branch, to disseminate and get advice about how to publicize and structure this type of database, because this work is totally new for me. I connected with the Institute for Economics and Peace, their African director, which made that Global Peace Index. I connected with 2 branches of the African Union, which is really exciting. I'm still working on that. And I've connected with an African Fellowship Program that trains fellows in different parts of Africa to do intercultural dialogue. And they're really amazing people. So they're going to offer us these fellows from a different program for us to go back to train, to then go to their local country. So everything's kind of stays at the grassroots. So I'm really not doing the work because I don't understand cultures, I'm sort of facilitating the process. So that's this horizontal, vertical approach that kind of worked out for figuring it out. Okay, here's some of the workshops we did. This is with people in Sidama. This is with chiefs. I said peace is like a river. Make sure you want the river is the peace, and the marsh on the outside is the effective peace, and the further away you get, the drier it gets. So stay near the well. Here are university law students. That face I'm making is a good example of what research looks like. Now also, this woman, some people may be familiar with the war in Tigray in Ethiopia, and some of the places that I went to in the north, people had not returned to Ethiopia yet because the war was sort of ended, but there was a blockade out there. So I met with that woman on the left, and the right had escaped Tigray. They saw people get shot. It was traumatizing. They were there for 2 months. Somehow they managed to get out, and they were able to attend school in North where we went to. But you get these little senses of tiny stories that people have when they're out there of all the kind of traumatic experiences that they've had to go through. Basically, every country I went to had some war, with the exception of Malawi, had some war going on quite recently. Here's us talking. This is Bazabi, the man on the right. I try to co-facilitate these peacemaking workshops, talking to people at peace with a local facilitator every time. He's an amazing person, and he had the idea to just go up to waitresses at a local restaurant. And so we did. We just asked the waitresses to come to us, and they told us about what peace looks like in their lives. This is us with blind students. This is another idea of Bazabi's. Really amazing folks. They told us about peace in their lives. Here's us with a couple of the moms. We had a great time trying to find this wild journey to find this mosque. Unfortunately, right after we left, in Ethiopia, it's very tense between Christians and Muslims, unfortunately. And some Muslims were trying to bury one of their imams. Christians said, no, that's our cemetery, you can't bury him there. And there was an attack. This is a day after I left. I don't know if I'm involved then. 30 people died. There was retribution. Churches and mosques were burned. So Ethiopia is a place with 80 different languages and cultures. So you have very different people living in one place. And unfortunately, it can still be quite volatile there. I went there because it's the head of the African Union. So you have a lot of amazing kind of Pan-Africanness going on there too. Okay, we're in Somalia now. We went to the furthest I was allowed to go. You can't really travel much in Somalia because of safety issues, but I had 2 senators who were very esteemed elders there be my guides to take me safely into the countryside to go to a camel dairy farm and drink the camel milk. That is a 1 liter bowl, and I drank 1 liter of warm camel milk. And I was fine. So I think I'm a local Somali. Shamarka was not fine. He did not have dinner that night. But we had a nice walk around. You don't ride these camels, you just hang out with them and get milk. So that was quite the experience. So I was out in Somaliland, which is sort of a safe, semi-autonomous region in Somalia, and then I went out deeper to the east to talk to some people out in Puntland, sort of vaguely safe. I just stayed in my hotel all the time, and I was on the Red Sea, so I could swim in the Red Sea. It was very nice. And then people would come to me, would come to my hotel. Okay, now we're going to go to Malawi, where things really, I kind of understood how to do the work. This is Jeffrey, who's now the co-director of this project. He's an amazing guy, very passionate about peace. And he is the interfaith coordinator for the country of Malawi for all interfaith activities, and they have 30 peace and interreligious villages of people who practice traditional religion, Islam, and Christianity in Malawi. So we would go to 6 places, and we go for 2 to 3 days in each place. Because I realized that if you want to kind of gather these practices, you really have to form a relationship with people, and you have to allow them to welcome you. So the first day we just do welcoming and dance. Ceremonies. This is one of the dances they did for us. Super high energy.
Wow.
These guys would come in who weren't dancing, and they would, and then they'd go forward. They say forward, and if you're dancing, they'd like try and hit them forward, and they'd like then dance really hard, because it's a really high energy culture. So you're supposed to show your strength. So occasionally they want me to go give some money. I couldn't do the thing. I just did it for the first time.
Did you score a mass?
I didn't score a mass, but they said if I come back in 5 years, they teach me to dance.
Whoa.
All right.
There's some holy moments there. So the first day was kind of just letting them show me whatever they wanted to show me about peace in their area. And then the second day, we talk about conflict roots. And then we spent a lot of time focusing on community capital. People didn't have, money was an issue everywhere you go. There's no money. And even basic things like asking people to do this research with their local community for you, you run into issues because how do they afford taxi? How do they afford paper? How do they afford pens? You know, how do they send it back to you? So kind of local means of getting stuff done are very limited. However, the thing that's really awesome and why it's cool to do this type of research in Africa and then go other places is that the communities are really, really strong. So while development is pretty weak, there is still a lot of strength in knowing how to be together. The rituals are still strong, the dances are strong, the singing, the songs, traditional songs they have are strong, marriage ceremonies are strong. The strength of the women is incredible, the roles of the elders are quite defined, the importance of it being passed off to the youth is still there, so you can sort of see a way where communities can come together in that. And if Malawi or Somalia was in charge of a global peace index, they would have an elder metric for how much you respect your elders, which we would never even think about. So if you think elders here, you know, how's our elder system doing in the United States? Do you feel respected? Is there space for you to pass on your wisdom, traditions for you to pass on your wisdom to the younger generations? Or is that like
in
you
the
don't even know?
tribes? Yes.
Yeah, there you go. In indigenous American systems,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, we would be really low. Iceland probably be pretty low. And other places would be a lot higher. So learning, you know, seeing that in action and learning from it, you can't emphasize how important that is. And of course, that's not just Africa. That's a lot of cultures where the roles are really strong. And they're very proud of their system too, you know. On the other hand, they notice changes that are happening and how roles for women need to keep being pushed up and up. In Malawi, all the women choose the new chiefs. They mostly choose men, but sometimes they choose women. But it's only the women from the highest clan that gets to make the choices everywhere in Malawi, which is pretty interesting. I think probably 12 of the 15 are men, but 3 of the paramount chiefs, which is like whoa, way high. I didn't get to meet any of those people, are women. So, first day, we just spent with the people, letting them decide what they wanted. Second day, we talk about peace and conflict in the community, how things were going for them. And then the third day, we do something called peace mapping, where people would kind of take time visualizing peace, sharing what they saw, the images and the metaphors that they saw, the animals they saw, the nature scenes that they saw, feeling that they had of peacefulness, dividing it into different worlds of peace, community world, personal world, environmental world, spiritual world, whatever it was specifically for them. And then we get into small groups and people talk about the practices that brings those worlds out. That was sort of our method for the first couple days. Everything happens under the tree. This is a mango tree. You'll see in a lot of these photos we're under the tree. And the mango tree grows in this way, according to the person I talked to in Malawi, for the sake of providing shade for the people. That's its scientific purpose. The last day, the youth would spend time doing whatever artistic performance they want, and twice they did drama. So this is a drama performance on why a Muslim and Christian should be allowed to marry and how to convince their family of that.
How did that go over?
Well, it was well received. Yeah. This is one at a school, so you have all the kids flashing the peace sign, just listening while the adults are on the other side, paying attention to the work that we were doing. Okay, and then on the third day, we bring the youth together, and youth in Africa means 18 to 35. So I'm a youth. I'm an elder. So we would get them together, and the work that we did was only kind of just beginning when we left. We would get the community practices, but for the traditional or indigenous practices, we bring together the youth and the chiefs and ask them to talk about peace practices through the generations that have been going on, and for the youth to do their own research on it. And that's what we're trying to do in a lot of these countries now. So this is actually them playing telephone Pictionary, if anyone knows that game. Great getting to know you game. You write something really ridiculous and someone has to draw it, like I saw a man upside down on the moon. You know, but they would just write really, not all of them, but some of them would write very simple, beautiful things like, I love my family. Oh, okay. So, pure hearts.
Are those bananas?
Those are bananas. The bananas were amazing. So many different types of bananas. Our bananas are so big. Imagine if you squeezed that taste down to something a quarter the size, but kept the same, you know. So you have like each little morsel of banana is so much denser in flavor. That's how I describe it. So they would get together with the chiefs, and now I'm just getting that research to come back over the last couple months that they've been doing, working with the elders and with women about whatever they wanted to research, that they wanted to focus on in their community on peace, and then encouraging the youth to bring new ideas too, because the culture is living, and we know that times are changing in a lot of these places, particularly because of climate change, which is a really big issue here. And so they would then get their own ideas about kind of how they want to see their culture in the future. Okay, so this is part of the thing we're presenting with the African Union. It's on research metaphors. This is the traditional way of looking at research. These are the 8 pillars of positive peace: free flow of information, good relations with neighbors, acceptance of the rights of others, well-functioning government, sound business environment, etc. But the way you structure it is really important too. These are pillars. Not a lot of pillars in Africa, by the way. It's very, very Roman. So strong. You know, things that are strong that don't change, that if one falls over, you hope that some of the others are still in place. And we saw that in the January 6th Capitol attack, where part of our pillars of our society crumbled, but others were still strong, and so our democracy continues to go. So I like this in some ways. On the other hand, these are not elastic, and pillars don't really move. So it's kind of a fixed, strong way of looking at how to do research. This is an indigenous paradigm of research, which really involves the community, respecting the community, making sure we have a relational way and not an individualistic way of looking at the world. Spider web into a heart, which is kind of cool, making sure things are elastic.
Is that your graphic?
Not my graphic, no, but a couple of researchers I'm working with. This is actually from New Zealand, and this is from Botswana. And then this is a decolonization paradigm, working on how in the process of doing research, we realize injustice has been done to our communities through research. So we have to make sure that we are transforming that, decolonizing our minds from the way that we think we're supposed to think so that we can have our own way of knowledge to be accepted, and having there be healing in the process. So research is healing, research as autonomy too for our communities. And these are ocean waves which move in kind of layers. So you think of research as involving movement and giving life to it. So I like combining these different aspects of how we sort of do research. Okay. So here's the end of the project. I've just finished this 5-year roadmap, which we've sent to the African Union, and we'll see. They've already expressed interest in teaming up, but we need to keep the conversations going. So I'm going to go back to Uganda in October for a few weeks to present what I've done and get to see all my friends again, which I'm very excited to do. And then Jeffrey and I and this team of about 15 people we're working with that are active in this project want to keep going and do in the 5 regions of Africa, North, East, Central, West, and South. We would go to each region once every 5 years and lead these training retreats with local leaders to talk to them about how to do this type of local research for peace mapping, peacefulness in their society. Bring in some great people from Botswana and Uganda who are indigenous research experts and kind of let them talk about that, and schedule trips for them to go around their communities and their countries, exploring how peacefulness is. I call them peace explorers. Then we send that to the African Union for kind of making this database of lists that people can look at to see how peace is practiced in different areas. And then letting these practices be utilized when a country is at risk of getting into violent conflict to mitigate some of that conflict with these rituals. So ideally, if this works out and I get a boatload of money, TBD, I would go back to Africa once a year for just a couple weeks and help people facilitate this process with people. Anyway, that's I just unloaded on you guys, so thank you. Thank you. So I welcome your questions. Yes.
So Seth, you're not just inventorying organizations in Africa that are working on peace, but sounds like that's part of it, linking all these organizations together, is that part of it? But you're also trying to, this is a question, are you also trying to teach people how to continue this work or how to spread this work beyond wherever it's already established?
I think that
Is that what the trainings are about?
The trainings are about gathering how it exists. And in the process of gathering how peace exists in communities, you're empowering those communities to respect and continue and nourish these traditions, which are being minimized by urbanization and globalization in a lot of ways. So the feeling that we get when we go to these communities have nothing and people don't go there, but they're peaceful cultures of how they are to be together in relationship is super strong. So going to these places, it's kind of like you have to take the responsibility seriously and continue the engagement with them. I think peace really just exists at a local level, and the idea of a universal peace doesn't exist. It's just what we individually or collectively experience, and there's no one big peace definition that we all have to follow. So I'm moving away in this sort of work from how the organizations view peace and just stay at sort of the grassroots level, we'd say. And the idea of cataloging what these organizations are doing is just for the process of publicity and dissemination of the work. But making sure the organizations and the structures of how we design it also respects the local people who we've given the information to. In a lot of research, we get the information and then we put it somewhere else, but we never recycle it back into the community. So I have to make sure I keep talking to these people that I've connected with, and I do that every day. Otherwise, it's just the same stuff that's going on with a cool intention but doesn't really go anywhere. The work itself, I find, is just trying to stay local with training the people in these countries, then to go back to their community, which they'd understand better than me. But even within each country, there's so many cultures that there's going to be a lot of places they're not familiar with. Just like if I went to different places in America, I wouldn't be very familiar with that culture. And we're trying to retranslate each country, so this is a country-by-country database we're making, into one language of each country too. Yeah.
Is there discussion of kind of using this methodology in other continents or countries?
Absolutely, yeah. My dream was a world peacemaking database, and I think every continent, if you can parse them up that way, have sort of a contribution to make in our world healing. In Africa, it's community and relationship philosophy. So I don't know how I do this work in America, frankly, because it'd be hard to me. Like if I was giving these workshops in different places, I'd get like 100 to 200 people come for 3 days, like take work off. So whether I could do that in other places in the States and get people who I give 24 hours notice to take 3 days off work for peace, probably wouldn't happen. So absolutely, and I think I like starting in Africa because while development is weak, communities are strong, and it's easier to start peace with communities and not development. And we often do the opposite. We pump money in, and we get strong structures and strong government and stuff like that, but the root of how people actually view the daily practice of feeling that experience has not really been sustained yet. So it'd be cool to connect this with other continents, yeah.
Did you get any feedback from all the participants about why they wanted to come?
They want to come because I think when you're on the edge of losing peacefulness in your culture, you're so hungry for anything that would promote it. That's my feeling. It's either war or poverty every place I went to. If these cultures are comfortable, you're going to have less of an interest in really taking the time out of your daily life to talk about peace So that's my feeling. Also, I had a lot of great local connections everywhere I went, so I was trusted. If I just had gone by myself, no way would I have gotten that. But because I went with a national leader and then a local leader, so we had 3 people, someone who lived in the community, someone who was from the same country, and myself, and they knew that this work had sort of a cool arc or spread in all of Africa, and that I was going to share this with a lot of people, what I found. On the International Day of Peace in September, we'll share some of our findings and structures of how people have practiced peace. It's a lot of simple stuff, like forms of communication, farming, taking time to yourself, spiritual experiences, religious practices, things like that. That will be the nature of it. So on the International Day of Peace, we're trying to release sort of this first batch, although I'm just working on another part, so I haven't taken too much time to think about how to do that yet.
Seth, do art and music feature into the workshops and the conferences?
Yeah, sometimes I get there and they just sing to mark the arrival, or sing to begin and sing to end. The dances were interesting. One of my first days in central Malawi, they just wanted to have women dance to show me how women view peace. It was a harvest dance, very beautiful. And then the men were going to show me their peacefulness, and they just played a card game. Funny aside though, I just saw, there's 200 people around us, and I just go in the middle and just watch them. And then I have to talk in public about what I saw to everybody. And so I see this harvest dance, and it's very beautiful. So I'm kind of the theme of it was, please men, you must hear my voice. And then the men hear the voice and respect them. The women celebrate and say, we love you, we thank you for hearing our voice. And then the men, so it's this empowerment dance. Then the men come out and they play this card game, but on the cover of the cards are naked women. And I was like, man, why would they, what does that mean?
What race were the women?
White. And then I realized it's just a pack of cards. It had nothing to do with the game. But I was just so stuck after seeing this empowerment dance. Like, it's really interesting. But, that was a funny moment. Public, 200 people, public processing. I had to not mean anything. Yeah.
So you say that you focus on the understanding of local communities of their peace, because global, it doesn't make as much sense on the day-to-day life. How has your perspective on your local definition of peace changed since you started this?
Yeah, I guess I think of it less. I'm definitely an individualist in the sense that I came to Malawi County by myself 9 years ago. On the other hand, I guess now that part of my journey is sort of over, I think more about the community aspect of community harmony and how peace for me just exists on that community level. And we all have our own little packages that we bring into it, and I have my own things that I need to do every day to feel good in my life, but I think I'm definitely moving more towards that relationship view. We're so individualistic, and it's led to a lot of amazing things, and a lot of people envy how free we are in our daily experience to go do things. But I see the shortcomings of that, because I don't think our ceremonies or rituals for important events that people have in their lives are really that set. And some people like it because you can kind of do what you want when you get married or when you die or whatever. Those traditions can be open to the family. On the other hand, some of us just don't know what to do. And I feel that way. I just don't know what to do when some of these bigger events happen. So I'm grateful for having that here, because here it's pretty strong, strongest than I've been anywhere. If you have a church community, I think you can kind of have that. Kind of a school community or your work community can have that. But we don't know our neighbors very well. So where we live, that's often where it needs to be, because that's where you're around. So I'm trying to talk to my neighbors more, I guess, and just appreciate also the place that is here, while also acknowledging that there's still a lot of stuff that's gone unhealed over the last 200 years here. It's going on, and we have a lot of people who move here who have had issues, because most people don't come to Malawi County if they're super. You come here because something happened. If you're coming here by yourself, something happened to lead you here. So I know a lot of people who come here also have personal issues too. It's a good question. I'm still thinking about that as I go through this experience. Yeah.
Hi, Seth. I heard a recent report on world populations, and that there's going to be in the near future dramatic shifts of where the world's largest cities are, and they'll be in Africa.
Yeah.
There's going to be more urbanization, there's the loss of the rural community. I was just wondering and they'll be young, and there's not a lot of infrastructure. Like Lagos is going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that was in the perspective, if there was anything that was being addressed, that this wonderful peace building in the rural areas of Africa, many communities in Africa, is potential for a lot of loss.
Yeah, it's pretty rough in a lot of the cities there, really. And that's why I don't call this an indigenous peacemaking database, because you can't neglect what's happening in the cities. And I did that in Somalia and Ethiopia. I didn't do that in Malawi. So I'm kind of still figuring that aspect out. But you're right. It's you can kind of see the hopefulness in some of the cities if you can harness the power of the youth for something really positive, because they're looking for something to do. And if you give them something to do, they're going to do it. You know, that's if they trust you, they'll go do it. So that's why doing some of this work, they trusted us. Whenever I had questions like, hey, would you guys do this exploration for the next 3 months? I can't pay you, but yeah, no question, we'll do it. On the other hand, if they don't have positive mentors and their community, their rituals are not being used anymore, all the dances in the city are kind of gone, you don't see that so much, then you see them as the indicator of a place when it's about to enter violence, because they're really unhappy about the government and about not having any jobs and about their family issues going on. So yeah, it's a scary issue, and climate change too is the same. It's a scary issue in a lot of places, and they're already seeing the floods and the droughts in a lot of these places. Somalia hadn't had rain for a year when I got there, and a lot of animals were dying. There are floods in the south because Malawi's near the cyclone area between Mozambique and Madagascar, and you get that coming out there. So there are some people who had the idea of integrating new ideas of how to do farming and agriculture to get people to have new work to mitigate against that, and that's real. But I think also making sure you engage the youth and say that you guys have important things to share, and you have a lot of wisdom also in the cities, and letting them feel comfortable sharing what they've learned in their lives too is maybe a way to include them. But it's also a little bit of a scary thing. I hear you on that.
The international peace villages, were they who set those up originally, and how many people typically lived in one?
Well, it's an organization within a community, but within a village or a small town. But it's sort of one and the same. I find out. So it's set up by the United Religions Initiative, which is the biggest interfaith organization in the world, and they have in 130 countries or so. They have these we're called cooperation circles. So they're great places to go to because the infrastructure is already set up for talking to people. In Malawi, there's 30 of them. In the United States, there's hundreds, I think. Some countries don't have any. So they're set up by this interfaith branch that works with bringing people from different religions together to do humanitarian work, I would say, while also kind of fostering golden rule-like qualities in the world.
Where's the closest one to here?
Portland, probably. There's a few different ones in Portland. Yeah. And some of them have specific causes that they focus on. Others are more general, I would say. Yeah. But I've been aware of them for about 10 years, so it's neat to finally connect with them.
Do those interfaith groups practice the same kind of peace practices as these communities, or do they, in those circles, do they have dances they do, or?
Yeah.
I'm interested in the translation.
The question was about do the interfaith circles have practices that they do together, and it's more like there's an organization that just came up naturally out of the community. It's not really separate from the community. In the city, it is separate from the community. It's like a group of people who want to do peace stuff, but in the rural areas, it is the community itself. So yeah, they would have dances, and there's not too much. In Malawi, you can see billboards promoting interfaith harmony while you're driving down the highway. Super cool. Muslim is a strong minority population, but they still have radio programs on the public radio talking about Ramadan. I mean, just different type of stuff going on out there. So but some of these people are from the same culture, so their dances and their languages are the same, and they will share those practices together. I couldn't really tell a difference between, they seemed like they were doing all the same things together, and their rituals were pretty strong. They're farming together, they're working together. But in some other areas, they won't talk to each other at all. And that, because Africa is super religious, I met one woman in Somalia who was not religious, which is amazing that was in Somalia. Everywhere I met, everyone's religious. So if you're talking to a religious community, you're actually not leaving anybody out, because these are very religiously inclined cultures out there. Yeah.
Seth, Nils Christofferson's father, Leif, has worked around the world with for decades. And he says that what gives him hope about Africa is the communication among universities across nations. That the governments are corrupt, and the governments are fighting, but he says that there's a great deal of cooperation among universities. Did you see that, or do you have any indication of that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. In fact, where I went, East African University is now Makerere University. It used to be in 3 different countries. It was the same university. It was Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. That's exactly right. Yeah, we're all part of one institution, so it's there. On the other hand, working with these indigenous researchers say that the colonization process in Africa was one of the center points was in the university system. So local ways of having interpretations of how to know things got totally lost and was considered not important anymore. And I noticed that because when I was at Makerere, I was learning peace and conflict from a Western perspective, for the most part. Even though I had all African professors, they all studied PhDs in Europe or America, because those are where the good institutions are. There's not a lot of funding for universities out there. The music department had broken windows. The pianos were in complete disrepair. A lot of the dorms were moldy. The campus battles for voting for campus leaders got violent often. It's understandable that people want to leave. But when you want to get, I heard way more about Freud than I did about Desmond Tutu. And I'm like, I don't need to hear any more about Freud for college. So you can see that too, where people are saying we need to make sure that, and local way of knowing is just how we think. How do we think? Is the way that I think different from the way that you think? And am I supposed to think in a certain way? Just the fact that we emphasize science and math in our education system shows that we have a specific way that shows how people should think. What gets cut out from our studies when budgets go down shows that way of thinking is maybe not as important as this way of thinking. So that type of learning in the university system, I was surprised to find, and a little disappointed, but also it's part of the process too. That the universities have been co-opted by the countries that colonize these places, and then they often founded these universities too. Katie.
I love how you said the emphasis on not just having neutral peace, but implementing positive peace practices. And I'm wondering if you have an example of a positive peace practice that they would implement after someone inflicted harm. So from a restorative justice.
Yeah.
Rehabilitative.
I think not having a penal approach to it, a punitive approach to it, where you feel like you have to punish someone, but making sure all parties who have been harmed, which generally involves a wide array of people, are included in the conversation. So generally there's someone facilitating this, and the circle process, if people are familiar with that, is a really good way to, in some education systems, particularly in Canada, but maybe some here are doing that, where everyone has an opportunity to speak, but you still realize that harm has been done, so the balance is off. So you can't just say hey, and the person who inflicted harm might think, I did this because I had a reason for doing this, so I need a chance to speak. You have to realize that the balances are off here, so there's a dynamic that needs to be put in play. So if you bring everybody who has a stake in the process and have been harmed and will be affected by a positive outcome, sometimes in those instances, if done wisely by people who know how to facilitate those processes and listen to people, everyone gets a chance to share. The person who inflicted the harm actually has to listen to the effect that, what they did on the other person, and that can often lead to an internal change that will allow them to apologize for what happened. So in a lot of these instances, the chiefs are in charge of what happened, but they talk to everybody, they get everybody outside, and they make a decision based off of what people said. So sort of generally it would just be on communication, making sure communication is honest and clear and involves everyone from the arena of that harm.
So that was a common practice that you would
Pretty much everywhere, yeah. I mean, the form that it took was pretty different, but making sure that there was a place. In some places, corruption would happen. People could kind of pay people off. There's a big issue out there because the chiefs are salaried. It's like our government officials are salaried, but not very much. So they sometimes want more money for it. And that was often brought up by people out there. So our circle processes of restorative justice does mirror, and if you study that, it does mirror a lot of these processes and probably came from these local processes of how to solve conflict on that kind of community level. Yeah.
in our
Anna, do you have another question?
Yeah, sorry, so I just have a follow-up question to everyone, just to remind everyone. So I'd asked, why did people want to come in?
Yeah.
You were like, I feel like people are pretty hungry for peace or more on the edge of less peace. Supposed to feel more comfortable. And I was also noticing, you're saying like everyone really wanted to demonstrate like their cultural traditions, like for you.
Yeah.
As a person who's not from their culture. I guess I was kind of wondering for them, as they're coming to do this, like how much of it is like, oh, we're all going to come together and do this amongst ourselves for ourselves, and was there an element of like, we really want to communicate something to this like broader community that like you're representing as a foreigner?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, on one hand, these dances they perform do happen every year. On the other hand, I'm not me in these situations. I know that I'm kind of a representative of sort of the wider world, and I have to be aware of how to handle that, I think. Also, we don't really know, I don't know exactly how big this will go. If it ends up taking off, which would be awesome. If it doesn't, then at least hopefully we've found some good, I made some new friends in the process.
Did they kind of know like what you were doing, or like how was that framed for them?
They did, but not often until near the end, and also because this current part of this project is sort of the design phase, because I'm just sort of figuring out what would be an appropriate way to do this sort of work. It was all kind of an experiment, and each place was a little different. So I wouldn't come in with any schedule. I would kind of let them set the schedule and just follow that flow. So in that sense, they probably didn't want to know. They probably didn't know, the possibility of it being this big thing. They were really just expressing their culture. But when a guest comes, you welcome them. And I think that's part of what it was. Like, you're a guest, and you've come a very, very, very long way, so I want to welcome you.
Sorry, one more follow-up question just to continue this line real quick. With the people who were then like your buds, who were the guides who were arranging all this, were they generally already locked in, and did they kind of have their own agenda too?
We were pretty much on the same page, but they had formed they were the leader of the local peace area. Whenever someone else wanted to talk about peace, they were always happy to bring it in and get new ideas. And there were sometimes specific things that people wanted. They might want a village bank for a village savings and loan program. They might want to form a new garden. They might want to have some more teachers come into their school. There was always something going on there. But they also were always friends and sometimes family members with my national leader, Jeffrey. So they knew each other and they were really good friends. Jeffrey had been to all these villages before. He does a tour each year. This just kind of made it bigger because he'd never brought someone from far away to join him. So part of it was just learning, how their group was going, just given a chance to listen to them, and then we'd go into a little workshop about talking specifically about peace too.
So you're almost like a guest speaker there.
Sort of, yeah, guest improv speaker. Yeah.
Just a quick question, sorry if you said this, but how did you choose the countries that you were going to?
I chose the countries because I wanted an array of peacefulness and non-peacefulness in the places that I did research. Because I think when Malawi and Botswana, where I'm hoping to go soon, very peaceful in Africa. Ethiopia and Somalia, unpeaceful if you look at statistics. So my idea was that you can still find peace in countries that are at war, because on that local level, peace still exists. Likewise, if you go to other places where peacefulness is really strong, like Iceland and Finland, you can still find really high rates of depression. So it goes, trying to just look at it at that national level, you realize that when you go smaller in the personal level, it doesn't integrate so quickly. So the next phase is to do a regional mapping of peace, but this was for kind of the conflict graph of peace to show that it exists in everywhere. Okay, any other questions?
One or two more, and it's one, so people have to leave.
Okay, I see a hand there. Hey, Judy.
I was just thinking about, as you were moving between these cultures that had, in some cases more conflict, or others that would score higher on the happiness index. Did you notice that there was any difference in the emphasis on education? Where did education, what role did education play in all of that?
It plays a big role. It's tough too because all of the high schools everywhere I went has fees. Primary school is free, but high school costs money, and all of your tests cost money, your uniforms cost money, so it's tough to keep people in school. Somalia was easily the hardest place because it's really a stateless country. There's no government in a lot of the places, so the tribes rule the land. But if you have no government, you probably don't have any roads. Probably don't have any health care, all the stuff that we take for granted. One place in the northwest, the capital of the region, Somaliland, hadn't had their roads paved in 30 years. Pretty rough roads. So I see, but other than that, emphasis on how strong the government was, people loved education, they wanted it, and they really were trying hard to get it for their children, if they could afford it.
Seth, did you find one or two places where there were a variety of religions operating really peacefully in communities, and what were they like, or what made them successful at that?
It's hard to say because the effects of what has happened to these individual places are so complex and vast that it's hard to know why some places haven't had religiously motivated violence and other places have essentially religiously motivated harmony comes out. It can be used for divisiveness, or it can be used to bring people together, and they really appreciate it. So, there I don't know. I can make up reasons, but I really don't know. Some people.
You did find some examples.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Where Muslims, Christians mostly. There was a Buddhist that I found, a Buddhist temple I found in Uganda, also a Baha'i temple that I found in Uganda, and there was a lot of harmony there. But in some places too, it's not just religion; it's cultures that have the issues. It's economic factors that lead to the issues between people. It's people within the same religion. In Somalia, you have, of course, Muslims and Muslims fighting each other. In many places, you have Christians and Christians fighting each other that maybe are from different denominations, are from different sects, but in other places it's just land issues, and religion kind of is thrown in as a reason, but really it's just land in a lot of these places. Okay, one more question maybe? John?
I have a question about, you said that you're talking about local peace and strong communities, and I was wondering if you have, what are the indicators that you saw of strong communities? How do you base
in this situation, it would be people working, living, and talking every day with each other. That's what I saw here, and I don't know how you apply that to this place. That's a really good question, though.
and then I'm curious about our community. Like I think you said that you
Yeah.
thought we had a strong community. Is that what you?
I do.
And,
We got some, but that's a good question. Like, how well do we? I think cooperation on community issues and finding common ground on community issues, political issues, is a really good source. If we have conflict between how we want to use a piece of land, are we able to compromise on it, or does it get kind of heated? Respect for new people coming in, and respect for people who have been here a long time is another indicator. And just doing stuff together. Like, are we farming together? Are we, working on new business ideas together? Do we have good relationships with our neighboring counties together? Are we finding that when needs arise, we address them together? There's a housing crisis in Joseph. Are we addressing that together, or are we neglecting it together? So I think for me, the big issue is when a need arises, do we all come together immediately and try to address the issue, or do we go about it our life? Great question, though. You have one more, Kasaya?
I was just curious, you mentioned you were going to share a lot more in September, but I was wondering if you might leave us with some peace practices that we could maybe try to implement.
I think you guys, we probably already have them. It's just doing them more often, maybe. You know, people have talked about it was a balance between being by yourself and being with other people. Going on walks on your own when you need it, or if you have an issue, making sure you always have someone in your family or community you can talk to about that issue. One guy says, I always talk to my mother and my wife. Whenever I have an issue, it always helps. And I need to be by myself, I go on a walk alone. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you very much, Seth. And yeah, we'll get more in September.
Right.
Just advertisement on Thursday at 1. I'm doing these weekly things, so I'm going to do a thing on Nesper's Then and Now. What's happening with Nesper's revival now. And also Cheryl has a little question
these
here.
surveys, so there, if you fill them out, you're supporting arts and culture in Northeast Oregon, and we want to make an economic impact, and by filling these out, showing how much money you spend when you come to these will help us greatly when we go to apply for grants. So I realize not everybody can use 2, but if I can get a few surveys